Hey guys, Stefan Fischer here from AllOffroad. I hope you guys are well. In today's video I want to show you 3 new products. Actually 2 of them are new, 1 of them I have for a while but only recently gotten around to install it. And maybe one of them even makes a good Christmas present for the upcoming Christmas. Before we get into the products, just a quick disclaimer. All of the products have been given to me for testing and review purposes, so I haven't paid for any of these products. However, as always, I tell you how I find it, and as important, I will keep you updated if any of the products fails in the future. So let's get into it. The first product I'm going to show you is the new MT620G PLB from GME. If you're following the channel, you know I'm carrying GME personal locator beacons for over a decade now. This was the first PLB I ever carried from GME, and that must be now probably 12-13 years old. Then I had the MT610G, which is this one, and GME recently sent me the new MT620GR. Fortunately, I've never had to activate either in a real emergency. But that peace of mind is worth its weight in gold when you are out in remote areas. GME has just released their newest model, the MT620GR. And while it looks almost identical to the MT610G I carry, the key upgrade is something called Return Link Service, or RLS. Let me show you both units side by side. They both have the same compact format factor, both are IP68, waterproof rated, and both can still operate with one hand even in an emergency situation. The physical design hasn't changed, which is good because the MT610G was already well thought out. So what RLS means is when you activate the beacon in a life-threatening emergency, you actually get confirmation that your distress signal was received by rescue authorities. The way it works is straightforward. You activate the beacon, it sends your distress call via satellite, and within 10 to 20 minutes a blue light flashes to confirm that rescue services got your message, know where you are, and are on the way. Now, that may not sound revolutionary, but think about the practical implications. Research has shown that survival rates increase substantially when people know help is coming. They stay calmer and can endure longer when they have the confirmation that rescue is on the way. Say you've broken your leg somewhere, deep in a gully, and you're in real danger. With the old MT610G, you press the button and hope for the best. You have no idea if your signal made it through the terrain to the satellite above. That uncertainty can be psychologically devastating when you are already dealing with injury and exposure. But with the MT620GR, if that blue LED doesn't flash after 15 or 20 minutes, you know your signal isn't getting through. You may have to bite the bullet and crawl to higher ground or try something else. Tie the beacon to a long stick, whatever option you have available, until you receive that positive return link signal confirmation. And once that blue light flashes, you know with certainty that help is on the way, which can make all the difference to your mental state and survival chances. Especially for bushwalkers and people who regularly venture into areas where satellite reception may be questionable due to the terrain. The new unit also connects to your smartphone via near-field communication and the GME AccuSat app. With that app you can check battery status, run comprehensive self-tests and keep a digital log when and where you tested the beacon, which is particularly handy for making sure everything is functioning properly before you head out on a remote trip. For bushwalkers especially, or anyone who spends time in areas with challenging topography where satellite line of sight isn't guaranteed, that return link service provides genuinely useful tactical information when you need it most. Now, some people asked about the new iPhone satellite emergency feature, where that is enough. In my opinion, it's a good secondary backup, but not something I'd rely on for a few reasons. They have no homing signal, so at night rescue teams may have more difficult finding you. They don't constantly emit the emergency signal for 48 hours, like a proper PLB does. Battery life is very limited compared to a dedicated beacon, and they're easy to damage during a fall or similar incident, where you may need emergency rescue. Both GME beacons are made right here in Australia as well. The new one is a little more expensive, about a $140 to $210 difference depending on where you shop. If you got an MT620G in the car and it's working fine, I wouldn't say you need to rush out and replace it. But if you do a lot of solo hiking or you're in the market for a new beacon anyway, I recommend the MT620GR. That return link feature could make the difference when it really counts. So this was a quick overview of the new GME PLB 620GR. This one will go in my hiking backpack because I really like that RSL feature and I think it's a great thing to have on any PLB. Let me know in the comment section what you think. So for the second product, I have a look at the Yare 120W flush mounted USB charger, their flagship dual port model. Before we go any further though, this isn't a complete test. I'll be running this unit indefinitely from now on, and I will keep you posted how it performs in real-world conditions. What caught my attention with the Yare is its slimline profile and proper flush mount design. Too many people, including myself, are still using those bulky cigarette lighter adapters, or you have to drill a hole for a cigarette lighter plug. With this unit, no drilling big holes, because really you only need a hole for the cables. And then the unit sits neat and tidy, exactly what you want in a touring setup. The 120W model, which I have here, delivers 100W through the USB-C port and 20W through the USB-A port. However, they exist in quite a few different configurations. This puts the 120W version into serious laptop territory and makes it compatible with power-hungry devices like Starlink Mini, which requires 100W for optimal operations. Most flush-mounted chargers top out at much lower wattages, so this is quite impressive for the form factor. One feature I also like is the lighting options. The unit has 4 small blue LED indicators around the charger face, plus additional USB lights in the ports. The wiring is straightforward. You can connect the L1 or L2 cable to the positive to have these lights permanently on. You can run just the charger, red and minus, and that means you will have no lights. Then you can include an external. You see these things here, that's a nice blue light around it, and you also have a light inside the chargers. Depending on how you wire it, you can determine what of the lights are on, and obviously there would be always on the external lights and the internal lights. I wired mine using a Wago connector for the time being, so I can easily reverse this configuration if needed. Installation in the Land Cruiser's rear cargo area was straightforward enough. The 18mm depth means it doesn't intrude too far behind the panel, and the compact 72 by 57mm face sits flush on the side of my fridge compartment without looking out of place. However, what I will be monitoring closely over the coming months is heat development, particularly at full 100W output. Any charger pushing this kind of power generates substantial heat during operations. Inherently limits heat dissipation compared to larger external chargers. This unit uses buck boost DC conversion technology, which should be reasonably efficient. But thermal management in Australian conditions will be the real test. The Yare accepts 12 to 24V input, making it suitable for most vehicle applications. It supports proper USB power delivery protocols up to 20V at 5A, so it will negotiate the correct power with whatever device you connect. At around $109, it's positioned as a premium solution, but that reflects a high output in a flush-mounted design. Most units I've seen don't offer this combination of power and form factor. The company also offers a 5-year warranty, which provides a good reassurance. For now, it is doing exactly what it needs to do, providing a clean, integrated charging solution that doesn't clutter up the workspace. The real test will be how it handles the heat, vibration, dust that comes with serial 4-wheel driving, especially when running at near full output. I'll report back later once I've put some proper kilometers and operating hours on the unit, but so far I'm pretty impressed. So let's now have a look at the quick fit solar clips from Smart Touring Systems, which they provided me quite a few years ago. To be honest, they've been gathering dust in the garage ever since. Why? Simply because I couldn't be bothered to remove my old 80-watt red arc panel. It was bolted down well and it worked. However, I recently decided to upgrade to a 120-watt Renogy solar flux panel. Replacing my solar panel, which is a red arc, which has served me very well. But it's only a 80-watt and it's not a shadow flux. And on top of that, I also want to try these quick brackets, which I have lying around for a long time. Never had them installed. Smart Touring Solution gave me these quick solar brackets, to be honest, probably 2-3 years ago, if not longer. But I just so far haven't had the use because my current system worked. But I thought now installing the new SolarFlux 100-watt panel, I'm gonna use it, and yeah, let's see. The aim was to get better input and slightly improved shade resistance. Since I had to rip the old system off anyway, it seemed like the right time to finally install these brackets. The system is Australian designed and made by Smart Touring Systems, which is usually a good start. The construction is 3mm stainless steel. It's definitely solid. There are no flimsy plastic parts to degrade in the sun, which suggests they should handle corrugated tracks without vibrating apart. The mechanism is a simple over-center latch, the base plate stays on the rack and the clips stay on the panel. It's a clean setup. I knocked the installation on the Land Cruiser over in a single afternoon. It's straightforward, but there are a few things you need to know before you start drilling holes. First, you will need to drill 6mm holes into your solar panel frame. If you aren't comfortable taking a drill to your new panel, these might not be for you. Second, and this is an oversight in my opinion, however, could since have been rectified, the kit doesn't come with mounting hardware for platform racks like the Rhino Pioneer or Roller Titan platforms. You have to source your own T-slot nuts separately. Also, pay attention to the orientation. Both clips must face the same direction. If you mount them facing each other, you will lock that panel onto the roof permanently. For the wiring, don't stick with standard MC4 connectors if you plan to remove the panel often. I wired in Anderson plugs to make the disconnect process actually quick. I think the kit nowadays comes with a leg pack, which then allows you to pop the panel up. However, my kit, which was one of the very early ones, didn't include that. This solution solves the biggest issue with roof-mounted solar, parking in the shade. Now I can leave the car under a tree and move the panel into the sun. It also means if I need that roof space for a different trip, say for extra jerry cans or a swag, I can just unclip the panel and leave it at home. So again, I just installed it and haven't extensively tested it, but that product is on the market for quite a few years and I did some in-depth research and I couldn't find any negatives. So I think it is a good solution and I'm pretty sure it will work for me. If you're in the market for a quick solar setup on the roof of your four-wheel drive, have a look at Smart Touring Solution. The brackets are a bit more expensive than other solar paneled roof rack brackets, but I guess you pay for Australian made and for the quick release functionality, which allows you to remove the panel in under a minute. Last but not least is a quick review of the Grayl Geopress, a new water filter which I tested on the recent Yare trip and it thoroughly impressed me. So let's get into my short field review. I saw these somewhere advertised and I contacted Grayl, or better the distributor here in Australia, and they sent me two. I'm always keen to carry water filters with me. In my backpack, in my day pack, I have one of the B3 filters, which I really like and used it quite a bit. It's pretty good. The Grayl filters out a bit more water. It's not as compact and small as the B3, so I think this will be the one for the car. But what I really like, you can filter water fairly quickly, 700 ml in a very short amount of time, how the whole thing works. You pull these out. The filter is here at the bottom. If you take that off, there also is a silicone filter in here, so you can actually even make, for example, an electrolyte drink in here, which you couldn't do with the B3 because that would be filtered out. How it works, filter on here. Now we just fill these with water and then we push it down, and that filters the water and gives you then the 750 milliliter of drinkable water. Okay, so we fill that up again. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a bit easier if you can lean on it. And just nice and gentle. But that's a very quick way of getting 700 ml of filtered water. And that's pretty much it. So now, ready to drink. I mean, I have a screwable cap. That is very quick, much quicker than, for example, the B3. Let's see how it tastes. Very good. Very nice. Well, it's pretty much tasteless. To be honest, the B3 I used actually earlier, but you taste it a little bit. I mean, I don't mind it, but you taste it. It tastes a bit plasticky. So that's the first filtration from it, but I'm just going to try. And you don't taste anything. It's just clean water, tasteless water. What you want, I guess. So to sum it up, the Grayl water filter produces the best tasting water of all the filters I have tried, and it also filters 700 milliliters of water in the quickest possible way, at least from all the filters I own. That's why it has become quickly my favorite filter when the situation allows. It filters out nearly everything, which is more than every of the other filters I own except the Lifesaver, which filters out even more. It's built like a tank. I've already dropped it on a rock without any issues. However, that durability adds weight, so it's not for long distance hiking. The handle design is also a little awkward. The opening is a perfect size to trap my index finger, which is a strange bit of engineering. It also is on the expensive side in regards to running cost. The 250 liter filter capacity is the lowest in the bunch I have. But given the water quality and the fact it's practically break-proof, I'll be keeping one in each vehicle for touring and day trips. So I definitely rate it and will use it whenever it is possible because of the beautiful tasting water. Please let me know in the comment section, have you used the Grayl Geopress? And do you also think it is the best tasting water? I'm keen to hear your opinions. Yeah guys, thank you very much for watching. Maybe I gave you one or the other Christmas idea or something you want to put on your wish list. I think all the three items I given you are of good quality, and it is something I'm happy to use and have in my toolkit. As always guys, this is a mainly self-funded channel, so if you like my content, like my reviews and the trip videos, and you can afford it, please head over to Patreon or buy me a coffee, and with the equivalent of a cup of coffee or two per month, you can help me creating this content for you. Please also don't forget to share, like and comment, because that triggers the YouTube algorithm and hopefully shows the video to more people. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you along the tracks.